Zootopia Episode 2, Nick and Judy. The rain's soft patter against the pavement seemed louder now, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The faint sound from the street behind them still lingered in the air, each echo weaving into the tension between the buildings. The raccoon's eyes darted nervously toward the alley, her paws tightening on the edges of her coat. She looked as though she wanted to run, but some invisible force rooted her to the spot. Nick's gaze stayed locked on the dark mouth of the alley, his sharp green eyes narrowing. The tall silhouette had been there, still patient, and now it was gone, swallowed by shadows too deep for even the streetlight to touch. Judy's heart beat in a careful rhythm, Judy's instincts pulling her forward, but the cool drizzle sliding down her fur told Judy to tread lightly. A gust of wind slithered down the alley, carrying with it the scent of rust, wet stone, and something faintly metallic, like an old coin pressed into damp earth. Judy took a small step forward, speaking just above a whisper, Judy's voice steady but edged with caution. She asked if Nick had seen the way the figure's posture had shifted when they noticed it, as if it had been expecting them. Nick's answer was a low murmur, barely audible, but it carried weight. Nick said he had, and that stillness wasn't just confidence, it was familiarity. Whoever that was had been here before. The raccoon flinched at another sound, softer this time, like a foot brushing against loose gravel somewhere deeper in the alley. Judy's breathing quickened, short, shallow bursts of fog in the cold air. Judy muttered something about them coming out when it's dark, Judy's words trembling like brittle leaves. Judy turned toward her, gently pressing for clarity, asking who they were, but the raccoon's eyes kept flicking toward the dark until her voice broke, and Judy simply stepped backward, then turned, almost fleeing into the mist. Nick watched her vanish, the dim orange glow of a far-off street lamp catching on Judy's coat before she disappeared entirely. Nick exhaled slowly, not from relief but from the tightening coil of questions in his mind. Without another word, he stepped toward the alley, the soles of Nick the Fox's shoes catching small puddles, sending ripples across reflections of neon signs above. Judy followed, each step echoing faintly against the close brick walls. The alley swallowed them quickly. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, not just damp but thick, as though it resisted their presence. A single rusted gutter above released a slow drip, each drop striking an overturned crate with an almost metronomic rhythm. Somewhere far ahead, something metallic shifted, the sound too deliberate to be the wind. Judy's flashlight beam carved narrow tunnels of light through the mist, illuminating cracked bricks, peeling posters, and rusted fire escapes. Nick moved slightly behind Judy, Nick's eyes flicking between the shadows at ground level and the black voids above, where windows sat dark and unwelcoming. The sound came again, a faint scrape, claws against concrete, followed by silence so deep it seemed to press in on them. Judy froze, one ear twitching toward the noise. Nick tilted his head, his voice a soft thread of sound, saying it wasn't the raccoon they'd heard before. They moved forward slowly, breaths quiet, boots whispering against the damp ground. At the end of the alley, something caught the flashlight, a small glint in a shallow puddle. Judy crouched, water seeping cold into the fabric of her uniform knee. Judy's paw closed around a circular object, its metal chilled by the night air. Judy turned it over, and the light revealed the unmistakable engraving of a ZPD badge. Nick leaned in, Nick's fur bristling slightly as Nick recognized the number stamped into the back. It belonged to Officer Merton. The badge was scratched, edges dented, as if it had been dropped or torn away in a struggle. Judy stared at it for a long moment, Judy's grip tightening, before slipping it into a secure pocket. Judy was about to speak when a voice, quiet, deliberate, neither rushed nor afraid, drifted down from somewhere above. "You shouldn't be here." It was impossible to tell if it was male or female. The voice carried no panic, no anger, only a cold, distant certainty. Judy's eyes darted upward, the beam of Judy's flashlight slicing across a rusted fire escape. For just a heartbeat, Judy caught the faint outline of a figure standing several floors up, leaning against the railing. The rain blurred its shape, but two faint reflections marked where eyes should be. Nick was already stepping toward the fire escape, boots splashing. Nick didn't look at Judy as Nick spoke. Nick voiced tight but calm, saying they had to go up. Judy nodded, and together they approached the ladder. It hung lower than expected, as though someone had used it recently and hadn't bothered to pull it back up. The metal was slick beneath their paws as they climbed, the sound of their boots on the rungs sharp in the muffled air. Halfway up, Nick glanced over Nick's shoulder and froze. At the mouth of the alley, just barely visible through the mist, another shadow stood, shorter than the first, hunched unmoving. Judy followed his gaze, catching only the faint outline before it slipped away into the fog. They kept climbing. The city sounds below became muted, replaced by the soft rush of wind and the rhythmic patter of rain on tin and concrete. When they reached the top, the rooftop stretched before them, cluttered with ventilation units, old crates, and coils of wire. Puddles reflected broken fragments of neon from distant signs. A sudden noise ahead, the dull thud of a boot against metal, snapped their attention to the far side of the roof. A figure was already moving, coat flaring with each stride, slipping over the ledge to the next rooftop. Without hesitation, Judy ran, Nick close behind, their paws slapping against wet stone, sending ripples through the water pooling on the surface. The chase was short-lived. The figure moved with impossible speed, leaping narrow gaps with a precision that suggested years of practice. By the time they reached the ledge, the shadow was 2 rooftops away and disappearing into the mist. Nick slowed, chest rising and falling steadily, saying they wouldn't catch them tonight. Judy didn't reply, Judy's eyes still scanning the empty space where the figure had been. The rain thickened, soaking into their fur. As they turned to leave, something caught Judy's eye near the base of a vent. A folded piece of waterproof paper, wedged between metal and stone. She pulled it free, careful not to smear the ink. 3 lines written in hurried, uneven strokes. Not safe. More than one Merton knew. Nick read over her shoulder, muttering that more than one wasn't the kind of detail you wanted in a mystery like this. Judy folded the note and slipped it into the same pocket as the badge. Her ears caught another sound then. The faint metallic clang of something shifting nearby. Nick turned toward it, muscles tense. The sound had come from the direction of another fire escape, one leading down to a different alley. Without speaking, they moved toward it, each step slow and deliberate. The air grew colder as they approached, the wind carrying the faint scent of river water. When they reached the top of the stairs, they saw something lying in the center of the rooftop. A photograph, face down. Judy knelt and turned it over. The image showed Officer Merton standing with a group of other officers. Behind them, blurred by distance, was the same tall figure from moments ago. Nick's eyes swept the surrounding rooftops. Somewhere in the darkness, the city was watching them back. The photo felt heavier than paper should, its damp edges curling slightly in the rain. Judy kept Judy's eyes on the blurred figure in the background, trying to commit every shape, every shadow to memory. The way the figure's head tilted toward the camera, almost knowingly, made her stomach tighten. Nick's voice came low, almost lost beneath the rain, saying they weren't just stumbling into this. Someone was leading them. She asked if he thought the photograph had been left here on purpose. He didn't answer right away, but the way his gaze stayed fixed on the dark beyond the rooftop told her enough. A flicker of movement near the far corner caught Judy's attention. Just a small shift in the shadows, like cloth brushing against stone. She straightened, Judy's paw instinctively moving toward her sidearm. The movement stilled. The wind picked up, curling around the vents and pipes, carrying with it the faint clang of something metallic in the distance. It wasn't random. It had rhythm, like a soft tapping, almost a signal. Nick angled Nick's head toward the sound, eyes narrowing. He suggested they move quietly, circle around the far side of the rooftop to cut off whoever was there. They moved together, steps soft, careful not to splash through the thin film of water covering the roof. Judy kept Judy's flashlight low, letting the dim glow of the city lights do most of the work. Somewhere down below, a car passed, its tires hissing through puddles. The sound seemed too normal for the weight pressing on the air up here. Another flicker of movement, this time closer, a shape slipping behind a ventilation unit. Judy slowed, heart beating a fraction faster. She could hear it now, the steady, measured breathing of someone just out of sight. She took one more step, and the shadow moved again, faster this time, darting toward the fire escape at the far end. Nick was after them in an instant. Nick paused, splashing through water as he closed the gap. Judy followed, her boots striking the rooftop in quick, controlled bursts. The figure reached the fire escape, but instead of climbing down, they vaulted onto the railing and leaped to the next building. The sound of boots on metal echoed, sharp and brief. Judy reached the edge and looked down. The drop was too far to follow safely without losing sight. Nick muttered under his breath, frustrated, and then noticed something glinting on the railing where the figure had stood. A small piece of chain, broken at one end, its links bent as though ripped apart in haste. Judy took it, rolling it in her paw. It was cold, heavier than it looked. She asked Nick if it meant anything to him, but he just shook his head, saying it didn't yet. The rain eased to a light mist, the clouds above shifting enough for faint moonlight to spill across the rooftops. Judy scanned the horizon. The figure was gone, swallowed by the labyrinth of buildings, but the sense of being watched hadn't left. Nick finally broke the silence, saying they should head down, see if the fire escape led to any kind of trail. Judy hesitated, one last glance toward the empty edge, before following him down. The metal steps groaned under their weight, the sound carrying into the narrow alley below. The alley was darker than the others. No streetlight reached this far. The air was cooler, touched with the smell of whetstone and old garbage. Their footsteps were loud here, bouncing off the brick walls. Nick slowed near a dumpster, his eyes catching on something at its base. It was another photograph, but this one had been torn in half. Judy picked it up carefully. The visible half showed a section of the ZPD precinct lobby. She recognized the tiles, the desk, but the half with any faces was missing. The tear was jagged as though done quickly. Somewhere deeper in the alley, a sound broke the stillness. The faint creak of a door's hinges. Both of them froze. Listening, the sound came again, followed by the almost imperceptible scuff of feet against stone. Nick leaned slightly toward Judy, whispering that whoever they were chasing wasn't running anymore. They were waiting. Subscribe for next episode.